Friends, if I could have your attention in just a moment, we are going to begin the service for Dr. Leonard Levitt of blessed memory. Just a gentle reminder before we begin, if we could ask everyone to please make sure their phones are on silent, not to disturb the sacred funeral service. On behalf of the family, I want to thank those of us who are joining here, and as well as the family members who are in Israel and other places around the world. Officiating our service today is Rabbi Leonard Levitt.
I'll call on Rabbi Noach Goldstein to begin with the first kapitel Tehillim.
Ashrei ha'esh asher lo halach b'atzas v'shar'im uv'derech hata'im lo amad uv'moshav leitzim lo yashav ki im b'saras Adonai chavtzo uv'saraso yageh yomam v'layla v'haya ka'esh shasul al pal gemayim asher peryo yitin b'ito v'aleh yolibo v'chol asher yaseh yatzliach lo chen harishayim ki im kamotz asher tidfen ruach al kin lo yakumu rish'im b'mishpat v'chata'im b'adas tzadikim ki yadeh Adonai derech tzadikim v'derech rish'im toved.
Yesterday, not long after we completed reading the Parashah of Shmot and were preparing to read the Parashah Va'era, Dr. Leonard Levitt, Reb Aryeh Leib ben Reb Ephraim, passed away. For 5 years, his beloved wife of 51 years, Yafa, together with his loving children, David and Tikva, and their children, surrounded him with care, protected his dignity, and did everything within their power to support and sustain him, even as the illness relentlessly and painfully progressed. But before then, it was he who cared for them. He loved them, and he did everything within his power to create for them a life filled with meaning and joy. They traveled and they hiked. They celebrated smachot, and they supported each other in so many ways. Lenny Levitt was passionate about his family. He would do anything for them and did so much for them. And he was passionate about his hobby of photography, taking pictures all the time, especially of David on their travels, posing alongside road signs and historical markers. And so much so that once one of his grandchildren was surprised to learn that Saba was actually a physician and not a professional photographer. And he was passionate about his profession of medicine. Yafa he met while he was in medical school, set up by a classmate of his who was part of Yafa's extended family of survivors. And while he never let his profession define who he was a physician of extraordinary care who sat and talked with his patients, sometimes for so long that Yafa, who did all of the scheduling, had to block out breaks in his appointment schedule just so he could catch up with his schedule. In the 80s, when the Russian immigrants were coming to Chicago, he took on many of them as patients, first communicating in Yiddish, and then after teaching himself the key words in Russian, sprinkling them into his conversations so that his patients would feel understood, respected, and at ease. Everyone knew that Dr. Levitt was more than just a professional who excelled in medical knowledge. They knew he was a person who cared, a person never too proud to seek consult with other doctors, a person willing to research the more complicated cases to find an answer and to give his entire heart and soul to those who depended on him. And that's the way I remember him, as a humble, kind, and caring person. A man I would sometimes see dressed in his walking gear alongside Yafa, hiking for miles a Jew who I would always find in shul. But more importantly, he was a man who saw others, whose vision was broad and whose care was vast. His hello was sincere. His willingness to help knew no bounds. Once I stopped him at Kiddush to ask about a medical concern. He gave me an answer on the spot, but then a couple days later he followed up just to make sure his advice had helped. That's the kind of doctor, but more importantly, that's the kind of person he was. And now, as I began, HaKadosh Baruch Hu took his precious neshama at a moment of transition between two parshiot, Shmot and Va'era. And perhaps it's fitting then that we should turn our attention for a moment to that very moment of transition in the Torah and to two details of the opening of this parasha. First, that the opening words of Parashat Va'era are found in the middle of a paragraph and not at the beginning. And second, that those opening words were Vayedaber Elokim el Moshe, and God spoke to Moshe, Vayomer elav ani Hashem, and he said to him, I am God. Just as that parasha began, not at the end of a concluding paragraph or with a new paragraph, but in the middle, today, in so many ways, is not the end of life nor the beginning of something new. Rather, knowing the Levitt family, I hope and I believe that we're actually in the middle of the story of Dr. Lenny Levitt's life. True, he's no longer physically present, but his life was so rich, so meaningful, so filled with purpose and care that his legacy will continue in how you speak to others, how you interact with others, how you listen to others, and how you support others. Of course, it'll be very different, emotion-laden and filled with a longing. And yet, if you carry his lessons, his values, and the stories of your lives together with you, then in so many ways, he'll still be with you. And you will be living in the middle of the parasha of his legacy. And the second is that while these most recent years were so very hard, reflective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's attribute of justice, of the words Vayedaber Elokim el Moshe. In reality, for so many years, you were blessed with God's grace and goodness, his mercy and compassion, the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Ani Hashem, the God of Rachamim. Years filled with togetherness and joy, with family and nachas, with accomplishment and healing. And it is those years that I pray you remember and share. The years when he was active and engaged, the years when he offered kindness and healing, the years when he built a family and passed the values forward, the love that he learned from his parents, Fred and Charlotte Levitt, alei shalom, Yafa, David and Tikva, Aaron, Sarah, Eliana and Moshe, and to Dr. Levitt's sisters in Israel, Edie Rose and Sandra Salinas, our hearts are with you. May you find comfort knowing that not only did your husband, father, grandfather, and brother make a difference in the lives of others, but also shaped your lives with the values he held dear, the care for others, the pride of a Torah life, and love of family. And to Dr. Levitt, Rebbe Aryeh Leib and Rebbe Ephraim, on behalf of your family, your friends, your patients, and our community, I ask your forgiveness, your mechila, for anything we shouldn't have done but might have done, or anything that we didn't do and should have done. Your life was filled with meaning, and your presence enriched so many lives. Bila hamavet lanetzach umacha Hashem Elokim dim'a me'al kol panim. May your soul rest in the bonds of eternal life. And now it's our honor to hear from his son, David.
Before I begin, my mother and I want to thank the staff of Buckingham Pavilion Nursing Center for caring for my father over these past difficult 7 months. We especially want to thank Lily, Director of Nursing, for all the kindness that she did for my father. To understand my father, it is good to look at 4 things that he loved: his grandchildren, his vacations, his patients, and Judaism. My father truly cared about his family and wanted to spend time with us. Unless it was less than 10 degrees outside, it was understood that we were going to my parents' house for Friday night dinner or coming to visit on Shabbos afternoon. When we came over, my father's greatest joy was spoiling my kids with chocolate and desserts. When he learned on Friday that he had become a grandfather for the first time, he was so excited that he hiked all the way to Evanston Hospital on Shabbos to set his eyes upon his first grandson. I don't know if I've ever seen him happier. But that was not the only hiking he did with my mother. Whether it was popular places like Yellowstone National Park that everyone goes to, or the obscure James A. Garfield National Historic Site that only the Levitts seem to grace, if there was a national park or monument in the lower 48 states or Hawaii, my family was visiting it. And it wasn't just the nice paved hikes that we did. I'll always remember climbing Angel's Landing with my father, a challenging hike that required holding on to chains to prevent ourselves from falling off a cliff, but with a breathtaking view of Zion National Park at the end. Of course, we also schlepped his camera bag on the hike, as all of you know who know my father were aware of his passion for photographing all the wonderful places that he visited. My father put his heart and soul into vacations, training beforehand so he could hike to the fullest, walking to Lake Michigan every Shabbos to make sure he stayed healthy enough to hike into his early 70s. When he wasn't on vacation, my father was seeing patients in his dermatology practice. He truly cared about his patients. I remember him working late into the night, researching with textbooks and journals to determine the best way to care for challenging skin disorders. When he retired, several people came up to me to express how they were sad that they were losing my father as a physician, noting that he really took the time to listen to their symptoms and make sure that he was making the correct diagnosis. Many of his patients came from the former Soviet Union, so he decided, as Rabbi Matanki said, he decided to learn some Russian terms that would help him communicate with them. He really wanted to assist his Russian patients, not just as fellow people who needed his help, but as Jews who escaped persecution. Indeed, he worked to instill strong feelings of belonging to the Jewish people in me. When it was time for my bar mitzvah, it was understood that I would be donating a good percentage of my gifts to Magen David Adom to help my fellow Jews in Israel. It's extremely Zionistic, with charities from Israel having a strong place in his heart. He also loved practicing Judaism, especially the holidays. In 1962, when he was 15 years old, he and a friend built a sukkah. It wasn't exactly one of the easy lock sukkahs so popular today. It consisted of 6 panels of very heavy boards, several cross beams, and a bunch of reinforcement boards. Nailing and screwing it together took the better part of the day, especially after time had warped the wood. Yet I remember somehow, once it was built, it could really hold only 4 people, and not that comfortably. Yet I remember somehow squeezing 8 people into the sukkah for dinner. But he loved that sukkah, insisting on building it with me until 2010. Even when the boards were ravaged by termites, he refused to get another sukkah, determining that the termite damage was just cosmetic and not structural. I think that what he loved most about the sukkah is that he had worked to plan, prepare, and build the mitzvah. He took so much pride in it, just like he took pride in his family and his patients. I hope that I can learn from him to hold strongly to my faith, family, and responsibilities.
Please rise for the memorial prayer of the Kelmali. El male rachamim shochen bamromim hametzehem menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina b'ma'alot kedoshim u'tohorim kezor harakia masirim lenishmahat Reb Aryeh Bereb Ephraim שהלך לעולמו, בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעד הזכרת נשמתו, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. לכן בעל הרחמים, יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור חיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן. Please be seated.
Friends, this concludes our service here at the chapel. Interment will take place immediately at the family plot at Ridgelawn Cemetery, which is on Pulaski, a block or two south of Peterson. Upon return from the cemetery, the family will be sitting Shiva at the Levitt residence, 2946 West Lunt. Those hours, as well as the minyanim time, are available on the service folder that you received on the way in. And for those who are online, that information is on the funeral home website. Memorial contributions in Dr. Levitt's memory can be made to Magen David Adom, as well as Congregation Kins. For those who wish to join the family, a procession will be forming to the cemetery just outside in the funeral home parking lot. If you're going a procession, please make sure you have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measure of safety, please have an orange funeral safety sticker, which you can place on the inside portion of your windshield, as well as a magnetic flag that can be placed on the rooftop portion of your vehicle. Please drive as closely to the car in front of you as safety permits, as we want to avoid any large gaps en route to the cemetery, especially as we go through the intersection. Please avoid talking or texting on any cellular device while en route to the cemetery, and please use your horn liberally. The following individuals have been honored to serve as pallbearers. When I call your names, if you could please rise and stand next to Dr. Levitt's casket. Alan Farkas, Dave Brachen, Stanley Wolf, Fred Walter, Matthias Schultz, Jerry Nussbaum, and Rabbi Baruch Weinberg. At this time, if I could ask everyone to please rise as we escort the casket, the rabbi, and the family from the chapel.